nobody's going to be able to run for that seat unless they have lived in the city for 12 months prior. Okay? Okay.
But the most important question is, if this is the language that we are recommending to put in front of the voters, proposal 10A, and then we have,
Well, no, that's a primary.
that's everything. 10A includes anybody who wants to run for election in the city of Cleveland has to have lived in the city for 12 months, right? 10A,
10A, before the primary election.
for any election.
Well, before the primary, before any election, as opposed to just any election, it's for the primary.
Okay, but then
So
the
if I-
question is there always, it always calls for a primary?
If there's not a primary, because there may not be
So-
more than two who run, then it would be, how do I have it here? If there is not a primary, I say, if the primary is not held, then prior to the date on which a primary would have been held under this charter.
So, Mr. Chair, a point on that. I think I'm sorry, if we just kind of think of this in a clear way, whatever date the general election is, whether it's a special election, whether it's a regularly held election, go back 12 months, and so if it's on November 7th, then you've had to be are we saying a resident or elector 12 months ago?
No, the proposal was 12 months before the primary election.
I'm just saying, though, I think it makes most sense just for simplification purposes. I don't think we mess with the primary. We just say, if November 7th is the election day, you got to go back 12 months, and or whatever date the general final election is, clock back 12 months. I mean, does that?
That's 9A.
Right, but then what you're saying, Councilman McCormick, is that somebody could run in that general, but not have lived in because then if you're talking a primary, so if you're running in the general, right, you would have had to have lived in the city, if the general's an election in November, you have to live in the city
Since November of the last
since
year.
November of the last year, which would cover a primary.
Correct.
But what you're saying, if there's a primary though, you wouldn't have had to have lived in the city for a year. You could have moved in a month before the primary.
Well,
No,
you
because,
wouldn't be eligible,
right.
yeah,
You have to be November of, say, 17, right, to run in September of 18. Primary of the general is November of 18. So, yeah, I get your point. It's not a full year from the primary. Right. But.
It's a full year from the general, though. Yeah.
It's a full year from the general. And in order to keep it cleaner, thanks, Rachel.
So if there's a special election set for 90 days from today, you still you say, okay, that special election is 90 days from now, 12 months back from that election, you have had to live in the city of Cleveland, which would, I guess, theoretically prevent someone from swooping in the minute a special election is called. You'll still have the requirement of having to be here for a year.
Mr.
So just working back from whatever the general election date is, for whatever reason, go back 12 months.
well, then that'd be.
Mr. Chairman, it would seem to me to simplify it, if you say that you have to have been an elector 12 months before any election, rather than go through the primary or the more you confuse voters, the more they say no, is what I'm saying.
Right, but.
Oh, you're saying any election, well,
Because
but,
we can't, because that would impact several different, we would have to talk about primaries, and if there's not a primary, then general.
Right.
And special, and so.
Right.
I'm thinking of the actual language on the ballot, that somebody would either say yes or no for a charter. If we just
Right.
said, because you can't just say that, Rachel, I think that's your point, is you can't just say anybody who wants to run for office has to live in the city for 12 months. Because we have to.
before what?
Right, you
Yeah.
have to specify before what.
What about if you did before your name appeared on the ballot?
Before the,
Which election? Because sometimes there's a primary.
Well,
For any election.
Mr. Chair,
No,
just as
not
a
all
point of
of it.
clarification,
No,
I
that's-
think, again, for clarity purposes, the election that's going to make you an elected official is the general election, not the primary. So if we say 12 months before a general election, which is the door that opens to put you in a seat, it just, I mean, that's my opinion.
But that doesn't cover the special elections then.
Yes, it
True.
would.
Yes, it
would.
does.
Is that
Yes,
still
it does.
considered a general election?
Yes.
Either way, okay.
But if there's a primary and there's not going to be an opponent in the general, then that primary has become the general election. And that can happen.
No.
If there's,
There will not be a primary if there's only two.
Primary go to the general, so there's always gonna be a contested general election. If there's a
There
primary.
might not be a primary.
Another, just a point of clarification, if you didn't meet that criteria, you wouldn't be able to pull petitions, or you wouldn't be able to serve. Could you run if you didn't meet that criteria?
To that point, maybe we ought to look at Charter Section 26 then, which is the qualifications for council members, and just add a sentence in there that says you must live in the city at least 12 months prior to any election.
Well, this is for the mayor also.
Oh, and then we could do it for the mayor. Is there qualifications, there's qualifications for mayor as well. We could amend 26 and, chapter 11.
I think the,
And then,
one,
yeah,
I think the reason why we were doing it in chapter 3 was because it was generally for all those municipal offices.
yeah, I mean, the other way to do it is 68 and 26, and add it as a qualification for the office. That way they couldn't even, they wouldn't be qualified to even run.
So on that,
And the qualification for the office would be that you have to live in the city 12 months prior to any election.
so on
Well,
that
they-
point, Mr. Chair.
They already have to be a resident.
How does that, through the chair to the director, if I don't qualify, so for example, if I live in Bedford and I want to run for Cleveland City Council, when I go to the Board of Elections, am I permitted to pull petitions? Or if I turn them in, are they rejected if I'm not qualified? Like, how does that work?
You know, I'm not sure how the Board of Elections would handle it, because you wouldn't be qualified to run. They may, I think we have to ask them, but they've asked us questions before, you know, is this appropriate when it's an interpretation of our charter? They don't interpret our charter, they ask us to interpret the charter, but I don't know what the process is, if they would say you can't run. Like, for instance, well, currently you have to be a resident of the city already. I don't know if they,
Yeah, but if it's not, the board that would say you can't have petitions or abstain, something.
we have to ask the board. I don't know how they handle that. But it would be a qualification. I mean, I would think you would not be eligible to run. I mean, your opponent would challenge it before the
Challenge it,
board.
yeah.
Because you wouldn't be qualified. I mean, it's similar to, you know, you have to be a certain age to run for Congress, you have to be a certain age to run for president. I don't think you get on the ballot unless you meet those minimum qualifications.
That's state law, those elections are run by Ohio Advisory Board.
But they defer.
Residency, but they would defer to the charter first.
They defer to the charter, and for interpretation of the charter, they ask us. And that's the other way to,
I think that we have, I think the sentiment of the commission is certainly no. But we want people that live here 12 months before you're run for office. The semantics of it are getting further. I am of the opinion that the council appointed to 12 months before general election, because it's already spoken to in the
Mr. Chairman, you mean, you're talking about before, are you talking about the year before you run?
Right there.
Or are you talking about other qualifications for the office?
No, adding the 12-year residency requirement to 12 months. Or, yeah, 12 years. To section 26 and
68.
68.
And then my,
To require 12-month residency
Before what?
Qualify to serve.
I see.
but what's, before what though? What's that 12 months
The
prior
first
to?
election you're going to stand for, whatever wording we choose.
Whatever
And that would
election.
include any primary election. I mean, it's just another way to get at it.
Right.
So if you look at section, or proposal 9A, I think if you just removed prior to the next regular municipal election, I think if you remove that and prior to the next municipal election at which the candidate desires to run for office. I don't know if I'm oversimplifying this, but I'm also trying to bring it down. So what is, I guess to Rachel, through the chair, what is the intent of putting both prior to the next regular municipal election or the next municipal election at which the candidate desires to run for office? If the sentiment is 12 months before the election, the general election the candidate wants to run, wouldn't that last line suffice?
The general election at which, well, that's not how the definitions are in the charter currently. We define next regular municipal election and then any other municipal election.
I guess the concern.
And there is a
so-
distinction, so,
So, but what if there were a regular municipal election and then someone stepped down a month before it and that special election were triggered 3 months later,
Yeah.
is that person then responsible to that regular election that's happening a month from now? Or are they responsible to their election, which will happen 3 months from now? Do you understand I guess I'm just trying to. So if there's an election for judge next month, that's the next regular municipal election,
no,
or for council, whatever.
no,
No.
that's
I
not
guess
the
I'm-
next, the next regular municipal election is every 4 years.
So if there,
Any other municipal election is any other municipal election in the intervening years.
Whether it's a special election or,
I guess I'm just trying to think of like what could happen if the next general election, so a council election is in a month, and a council person a month from their election steps down. I don't know. I guess,
Why can't it just state that your name, or you have to be an elector 12 months prior to your name appearing on the ballot or
Right.
whatever election you're running in?
that's exactly it. That's why I'm saying,
What Councilman's saying is, if this read, if 9A read, amend section 5 to provide that an elector of the city, in order to be a candidate for office in the city, must have been an elector of the city for at least 12 consecutive months prior to the next municipal election at which the candidate desires to
Exactly.
run for office. Wouldn't that include the next general election, the next
Regular?
municipal election?
I don't think so, just because that it's defined in different, it's defined differently. So I don't know that it would subsume that. I mean, if you look at section 4,
but is that, do we, I guess, is that important to have in there in the sense of whatever the election that the person's running for, whether that be the next municipal election or a special election, won't that last line apply to both?
we don't,
Arguably.
we don't use special elections in the charter.
Yeah,
We
we
don't
use
say special
other
elections, we
municipal
say
ele-
other municipal elections.
Can't we just take municipal out and just leave the next regular election?
well.
I guess I just-
I mean, regular municipal election is a defined term. Okay, so let's start there. So regular municipal election is defined. Everything else is called an other election.
Well, if we said other election, and it was a regular election, and they didn't have 12 months, and we said you're not qualified, they would argue that you didn't specify next regular municipal
municipal election.
in your charter.
That's
It
right.
is
Be
better.
that gray area. I mean,
It's better drafting to say regular municipal election or any other election.
Municipal election.
Yeah, other municipal election.
otherwise, we would have to amend or recommend changing several different sections.
Yes.
Including the definition of that next regular municipal election, which probably would.
So there's,
But I don't understand why 9A is a problem, the way it's drafted now.
I don't think it was a problem, I think it was an effort to make it just clean, just more succinct, but
I-
lawyers have.
I guess my point was,
This is succinct.
if the next regular municipal election comes before, shortly before your special election, let's say. So say, and I don't know if that's even possible, but let's say that there's a regular municipal 4-year election in a month, and you've got a special election 2 months after that because of a resignation. Is that even possible?
No.
No.
Okay, so then that's a moot point then, all right. I'm just thinking like, where's the benchmark?
Yes.
Would either Director Lincoln or Rachel, I mean, you understand what everybody's trying to get to? Would you have a recommendation on either of these proposals to get to 12 months before you're going to run for office?
So, through the chair, to Rachel, if the terms are next regular municipal election or any other municipal election, couldn't we just eliminate out of 9A the next and insert any other? So it's the next regular municipal election or any other municipal election? Doesn't that cover
Oh,
everything?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, or I was gonna say, or the
Well-
next election required by law or charter. Because that's really how it reads. The other election shall be held, the other elections shall be held as may be required by law or provided for in the charter. So you could say 12 months prior to the next regular municipal election or the next election required by law or charter as may be applicable.
Municipal election as required by law.
Doesn't it just
Or even
wanna-
just cut out regular
categories?
municipal.
Doesn't it just put them both?
I don't think you want to cut out regular.
Can we just say, can you just say, any other municipal election as required by law at which the candidates desire to run for office? On that second portion of 9A? That where you're covering the law and any other outside of the regular.
Michelle, can you make sure you use your mic? Sorry,
I'm sorry.
I'm getting yelled at by Channel 20.
I'm sorry. Can you just say at the second portion, or any other municipal election as required by law at which the candidate desires to run for office? So that'll cover everything?
Where would you put, and the elector has been an elector of the city for at least 12 consecutive months prior to the next regular municipal election or any other,
municipal election as required by law at which the candidates desire to run for office?
Any other election required by law, and I'd even add whichever occurs first,
it's getting longer and longer.
you know. See, I'm a little uncomfortable with municipal before election with KIP one, because that term doesn't occur.
Sure. Where? Yes, it
Muni-
does.
Next municipal election, without regular?
Yeah, look at section 4. That's where I got
Regular-
this,
at
huh?
any regular
Yeah,
municipal
section
election.
4, any regular,
Municipal election.
turn
primary
page.
election, Other, oh, there it is.
There it
Candidates
is.
for office to be voted
Yep.
certain Other municipal election by this charter. Yeah, but that excludes primaries.
Yes.
Any other wouldn't cover the primary?
Any other municipal election. The regular municipal election.
That's why I did-
Nonpartisan primary election to be held on Tuesday. Do you see what I'm saying? That doesn't,
That's why I did 4 iterations.
yeah.
Which one of the 4 iterations says 12 months before you're on the ballot?
I
All
thought
of them?
not, I was thinking 9A covered it, but in my mind, 9A does not cover primaries.
Which is, other than Councilman Casey, I think, and I agree that you wouldn't be an elector 12 months prior to the primary, but the primary doesn't get you into office. The general does. So I am comfortable with 12 months from the general as explicitly defined in the code, in the charter. And you believe that that's 9A, Rachel?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Councilwoman Brady.
I tend to agree with Councilman Casey. I think that you should have to be an elector for 12 months prior to a primary.
Okay. It's just, it gets harder and harder to define it, and if we're really thinking
a
about putting
primary.
this people
What-
in front of the voters, I think we also have to look at its potentiality at success. And if we
Well,
get
all it
in-
has to say, is the next election, which is a primary prior to a general.
But that's, under the charter, it's not. The next regular municipal election is not a primary.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it is. So maybe you
If
just
you
have to
have one,
change the
but-
definition of the next, because it's part of the next municipal election.
Right, but yeah, I
It's the,
understand.
it's the precursor, it's the elimination, the primary is what makes you a candidate in the next municipal election, if you win the primary.
Partisan primary.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, it doesn't make any sense that you don't have to live in the city for 12 months. I mean, if you're planning to run for office in the city of Cleveland, then you should know that 12 months before the primary you're going to run in.
Yes, Councilman.
On that point, just for a tactical, or just for informational purposes, if there's an open seat and someone runs for it as no opponent, would that technically still apply to the councilwoman's question or proposal? If you have no primary, are you held to the date in which you would have had a primary? Or how would that work? If you didn't have a primary, for example, just as a point of information? Yes.
Yeah, I don't. What would, do you say yes? So if there's
Yeah, I mean,
one, if
so
there's
I'm
one
the only
person,
one on the ballot
Yeah, I
in
do,
the
but-
primary, I should have lived
but you
in the
wouldn't
city
be on the
for-
ballot in the primary.
Well, okay,
You
but
would-
if I filed,
Correct.
if I filed,
If two people file for a seat in the city of
Right.
Cleveland, there's no primary.
right,
So is it your intention with the discussion now to have, when the primary would have happened,
yes,
a year prior to that,
yes.
and then putting that into a proposal for recommendation to the voters?
Yes.
Okay. Director.
I don't know if it matters, because when someone files, you don't know you're going to be unopposed until the filing deadline.
Right.
So you would be kind of foolish to say, well, it's 12 months before the regular election on the if-come that you're not going to have a primary challenger.
Right.
And then you'd be bounced. So I don't know that we need to get that fine, right?
Right.
Because you
You
don't
don't
know
even
that
know.
until
You don't even
the
know.
You
filing
don't know that
deadline.
till the last minute sometimes.
Exactly, and so it wouldn't be very smart of a candidate to say, well, I'm gonna just hope that there's only one other candidate and there won't be a primary.
Right.
And then I'll move in and I'll get 200 signatures, you know.
So Rachel, your 9A is 12 months prior to general election. 10A is 12 months prior to primary. Any election including primary. Is that correct?
Yes. However, Barbara and I were just working on some language, and Barbara figured out a very good way, I think, to fix this using 9A. And if you look at 9A, and it says, and the elector has been an elector of the city for at least 12 consecutive months prior to the next regular municipal election or the next election required by law or charter, whichever occurs first. This tracks language from Section 3 of the Charter, which talks about other elections as may be held, as may be required by law or charter. And also, it would encompass primaries, would encompass any election.
Special elections.
Yes, other than the next regular municipal election, which is, it covers as well. So
Okay,
I
so,
think that works.
that
You want to
is
hear it again?
or the next election as required by law or charter at which the candidate desires to run for office?
No, we would just put comma whichever occurs first.
Oh,
Yeah, because we're talking
as
about
required by law or
candidacy
charter, whichever,
occurs first.
what is that? I don't know what that means. Oh,
That
either
means-
the regular municipal election or any other election,
Or, yes. so
whichever
if-
occurs first.
That's right. If there is a
I got you.
primary, it starts from the primary. If there's not a primary, although you're not going to know that until the filing deadline, right? Because
You're
you don't
not.
know.
You don't know if you have a primary, you don't know anything. Yes.
I think a part of the rationale behind the general election was just that it is well-known in the city of Cleveland and easy to communicate that if you want to run for office, judge, council, mayor, you look at the general election day, and if you've been in the city for 12 months before that, you're good. I mean, I think to me, that was kind of just the layman's terms of easy to understand and easy to communicate.
Right.
That's just where I was coming from, that's all.
And is that covered in what we just discussed, in your opinion?
Well, if what the director just put on the table includes primaries, then no, because, you know,
Any election.
Any
But you
ele-
wouldn't know which
correct.
election you're gonna have until you file.
exactly, which
So
is
you
why
believe that there's still
simplification
some-
just, and again, I think about this from this table, we've got a lot of attorneys around the table and smart people, but 99% of our job is we spend on the street, or on the phone, or on email. And so I always think about it from how do we boil this down into a simplified manner so people can understand it, because that's what we do every day. So, you know, if someone's asking me, well, what are the requirements for running for office in Cleveland? Oh, you gotta live there 12 months, you gotta live there a year before the date of the election. Boom. I think however, that's just my opinion.
Right,
I
but
think
couldn't you
that-
say that truthfully with the primary included? Because that, I mean, while it's not filling a seat, it's not making that person an elected official, it is an election. I mean, it is, your name's on a ballot and you ask people to
Yeah.
vote for.
I guess I just, from my personal opinion, was that 12 months from the general.
Right. Okay.
That's all.
Mr. Chair, I tend to agree with Councilman McCormick. I think just in terms of ease of use, we want people to be able to pick up the charter and understand what the qualifications are. And with this proposal, it becomes more difficult to then have to cross-reference Section 3. You're getting into a lot of really expounding on the charter, we're just trying to figure out what the qualifications are. Whereas it is a much cleaner process to just pick it up and say, oh, you gotta live here for 12 months before November 7th.
Okay. So,
If you don't want to include the primary, then I would go back to the original language of 9A. Other municipal elections would include special elections, because we don't define special elections in the charter. In Cleveland, there are general elections and there's special elections, but we don't really define either in the charter. We have regular municipal elections, which are every 4 years, and then your special elections are the other municipal elections.
And then
okay?
we have nonpartisan primaries.
Right, and then you have
kind of provide-
nonpartisan primaries. If you don't want to include nonpartisan primaries, I would go back to the original language of 9A. If you do want to include nonpartisan primaries in this 12-month requirement, then we should change 9A as we discussed before, Director Langhenry's language.
But just
Okay.
a point of information, Mr. Chair, what is it currently?
nonpartisan primary?
I should know this. What is it
partisan
currently?
primaries do we have?
what is,
What is the requirement currently if you want to run for office? Since there is none.
For
You just have to be
residency?
a resident.
You have to be a
You just
resident.
have to be a
There's
resident.
no time limit.
No.
So we would be increasing then the time requirement from what we currently have to 12 months.
Right. You have to be a resident when you file.
So that could
To be
be
considered as a
the
candidate.
day of you could move in to Cleveland the day that you file, currently.
Yes.
Well, no, you don't even have to do that. For council, it says who at the time of his election was a resident of the ward.
So you could
he
move in, you could
represents.
move in to the city of Cleveland on November 7th. And, well, whatever, November 6th. I'm just trying to say that,
January 1st, because you don't start serving until.
okay, so this does significantly extend the requirement, is all I'm trying to say.
It creates a requirement,
Creates a requirement, correct,
where there previously was none.
right.
So I need to have some direction from the commission if the commission members are prepared to vote on either one as amended, all four of what was currently presented. So I think from the discussion, we have a 9A, which would not include primaries, 9A as printed without striking, and then a proposal 9B, which would include primary elections. Is it the wishes of the commission to see it clean on a piece of paper and vote on it in 2 weeks? Please no. Or is it the wish of the commission to call the roll or continue discussion? Looking for feedback, looking for input.
Is it two separate votes?
Can-
Or 9B.
One vote and then a separate vote for 9B.
And correct me if I'm wrong, 9A, November 7th, or special election. 9B, all of the above, including primaries. Correct?
Yes, so the 9B proposal is you would have to be a resident 12 months before any primary.
Right. And important to point out, we can recommend both, right? I mean, this is not one or the other. I mean, if it's important to the commission to have people living in the city to run for office, we can recommend both to the council president for the council to decide what the will of the people would be. So this is not these are not competing interests. These are, I think, all good ideas and good discussions that we can submit in a report to the council president. So,
Can I get a clarification?
clarification, Councilwoman Brady?
Thank you. The definition of elector, is that just someone who lives in the city of Cleveland, or is that someone, I believe, who is registered to vote in the city of Cleveland?
It's a registered voter. That's a term that's defined under state law.
That's what I thought.
And you have to be registered, but you also have to be registered at the address at which you live.
Right.
Further requirements under state law to be an elector as defined.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Council.
are we referring to the elector that has lived in the city of Cleveland because he owns property there, or because he rents there, or because, what is the rationale for?
By calling it an elector,
Yes,
they have to qualify to be able to vote at that address. And so the state law requires that your domicile, that's your domicile be
Okay.
at that address.
you can live 10 different places, but you can only vote for one,
That's
from
correct.
one. Now, we got into this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. The prohibition of somebody moving in and then moving out, and then moving back in, is that going to be discussed now, or you want to do that later, or?
Well, I mean, elector of the city of Cleveland for 12 consecutive months. Yeah, you couldn't move out of the city of Cleveland and be an elector in another municipality in that 12 consecutive months.
Okay, I understand that, Mr. Chairman. My concern is somebody that's moving in as an elector, and the law says, the law for the state of Ohio says you can live anywhere,
Correct.
but you can only vote from one place.
Correct.
So how do we prevent that, somebody from circumventing what we're trying to do here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's in this. I think what we're trying to do is just add the 12 consecutive month language, and we're always going to have those issues which need to be addressed under current state law with the Board of Elections by way of contest or challenge. I don't think we can get into, in our charter, yeah, I don't think we're gonna be able to address every scenario for people who wanna come in and run.
That may also be addressed by whoever they're going against in the election. That could become an election issue.
Oh, sure, right, right.
Right.
So is everybody comfortable with, does everybody first understand 9A as it was written and handed to you when you walked in? Yes. That includes 9A as it's written, is the November 7th. We'll call it 9A November 7th. We will call 9B, which has come from the discussion, which includes language as required by law or charter, whichever occurs first, to include primary elections. Without objection, I will call the roll on 9A as it was handed to you when you walked in, which we'll call November 7th. I hear no objection. I will ask the clerk to call the roll. Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
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 Yes.
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 Thank you. And proposal 9B, which I will read. I think I have it, Rachel. Do you-
I can read it, sure. I'll read the entire section so you all hear it.
Yes.
The name of any, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
What happens?
Doesn't matter. We still voted. It goes in the official record. Thanks, everybody, for your diligence.
Hey,
Is that adopted? What?
It just gets reported to the council president as a 6-6.
Okay.
Everything gets reported to the.
Got it.
Everybody gets compiled and reported, whether it's up or down.
right. Okay, so 9B, the name of any elector of the city shall be printed upon the ballot when a petition in the form prescribed in this charter is filed in the elector's behalf with the election authorities, and the elector has been an elector of the city for at least 12 consecutive months prior to the next regular municipal election or the next election as required by law or charter, whichever occurs first. That's the changed language. Such petition shall be signed by at least 3,000 electors of the city for the nomination of a candidate for an office filled by election from the city at large, and by at least 200 electors of the ward if for the nomination for an office to be filled by election from a ward.
Great. And we are calling this 9B. This one includes primary
Special elections.
and special elections and filling of vacancies under special elections. Clerk, call the roll. Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, clerk. So we're done with old business. Called progress, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're moving into Charter Part D, General City Operations, which is also part of the handout, or you were handed it was handed out to you upon entering. Chapter 13, Departments and Divisions. Chapter 15, Department of Law. 17, Finance. 19, Utilities. 23, Health. 37, Officers and Employees. And Chapter 40, Traffic Law, Photo Monitoring Devices. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to look through it, at least. We do have the recommendations from 2008 that are printed in the packet. I mean, there's really not a lot in Chapter 13 that I saw. I would put it on the table if anybody had anything on Chapter 13 for discussion. It's pretty basic stuff. Under Chapter 15 with the Department of Law, luckily we have the director here. Recommendations from 2008. Or I would offer to the Director of Law if there's anything you wanted to add before we got into the prior recommendations. Did you see anything different or more exciting to talk about?
No, I have no recommendations. I don't, and I'm neutral on the recommendations
Okay.
from 2008.
So then I would ask the commission if they wanted to discuss it and see if they're worthy of taking a vote. I'll leave that up to you, but we need, what is so funny?
No, I'm just reading the gender-specific language in all of this.
I
He
know.
shall be the legal advisor. Well, he is not a he.
I know.
Got it.
It's throughout the whole charter.
It is crazy.
Mr. Chairman, on that note,
Yes.
can we do a blanket amendment to change the whole charter in general to make it gender neutral instead of going through each specific one?
Rachel, it is.
I'm just asking.
Oh, yes.
We can do a blanket amendment, but somewhere, all the changes are going to have to be printed and shown, so that in our legislation, we will have to reprint the entire charter with all those amendments made. Now, on the ballot, it'll look like a blanket amendment, and it'll be easy to vote on.
But then
But I
rewriting.
will have to make all those changes, I'm just saying.
And we have to,
But rewriting the charter would just be an internal thing,
It would-
correct?
well,
If it was,
and
if
you-
it was.
Well-
You'd have a
voted
very
on-
large
voted
piece of
on.
legislation that would be passed out to the council, and you'd have to vote on that.
And also there's
And we-
requirements by state law for
we-
us to fully inform the voter.
Right,
of
and so
their-
they would have to be
of the
printed,
impact of the vote.
probably in
So-
the paper,
Right,
in the
we would
newspaper.
probably put it in the newspaper.
Or online.
Daily Legal News.
Yeah.
Online, arguably, under state law, if that would suffice. Should it be challenged, we would likely lose if we didn't mail it to everybody, I think.
Well, we wouldn't have to mail it to everybody, but it would have to be publicly shown.
Like libraries, universities.
The newspaper, Cleveland.
Mr. Chairman, if you know, when was the last time that we published the charter to the general public?
Online.
The whole charter.
Yeah.
And is online sufficient enough?
Well, we haven't changed it, the whole thing. In order to change it by way of vote, you need to inform the
The
electorate.
voters, what they're voting on, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
yes. And, I mean, Rachel's right. If we were to change every gender reference, specific gender reference, we would have to, the ordinance would be as long as the charter with strike-throughs for every he. What's submitted to the voters may be a ballot title, which is generally the summary, but the ordinance itself would be quite lengthy.
I tried, Gary.
No,
No, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But we'll continue to look at it. I mean, that was the first thing. You look at the charter and you just read the antiquated language and joke.
Yeah.
But changing it is real deal, serious business.
Yeah.
But we have had discussions with, even the Board of Elections said some municipalities did come up with some language to blanket change things under state law. So we're gonna continue to look at it
Okay.
and see if there's any changes. With the technological advancements and things, there has to be a way to do it and call it notice. But we'll keep looking at it. Under Section 83, Director of Law Qualifications and Duties, there was a recommendation in 2008, known as number 59, to amend it to clarify that the Law Department only needs to approve documents that legally obligate the city or expose the city to legal liability. I mean, I don't,
What that goes to is, right now, there's a requirement, if we were to enter into a contract, the director of law has to approve the contract as to form and correctness, legal form and correctness, otherwise it's not a binding contract upon the city. The way it was written before, we would interpret it, for instance, up in building and housing, contractors have to post a bond in order to be a licensed contractor with the city or a registered contractor. We have been approving those bonds individually. And it doesn't do anything to legally bind the city. It's really a bond that the contractor has to have so that if the work is not good, there is a small redress for whoever the citizen is who that contractor did work for. We've kind of found a way to address this a little bit. It's not as important to me right now as it was 10 years ago with electronic record keeping, and it's just a little easier to deal with right now.
Right.
So it's not the same issue as it was before, so.
great. Without objection, we'll move on. This one has always come up. The director is the prosecuting attorney in 2008 recommendation number 60 to amend section 84 to remove the requirement that council fix the number of assistant prosecutors by ordinance and instead leave the number at the discretion of the director of law and the annual budget process. I think Horvath brought this up at his opening remarks. So to our colleagues here at the table, every year during the budget, we have the discussion with the director about the number of assistant directors of law, or assistant prosecutors, and the number is presented and proposed, considered, ultimately approved.
There's actually a separate ordinance that
And a separate,
identifies
right.
the number.
But that's
It's in
the-
the administrative code section addressing the Department of Law.
But the majority of the discussion comes up during the budget process. And then once we approve that, I think this is very antiquated. This goes back to when politics was much dirtier in the city, and the fear was that the law director would hire all these prosecutors and then have an army of people violating people's rights and then winning an election. But is it that important? I don't think so. I mean, I think we work well together. Our court system has its flaws, but it still operates, as do court systems across the country. Hearing no discussion?
I mean, I guess just one quick question through the chair to the director. Does the current system in any way limit your ability to bring on prosecutors? Or?
If I were, currently the number is 21. If I were to want more than 21 prosecutors, I would have to present an ordinance to you changing that number to whatever number I wanted. And it would be an ordinance that would allow it. I mean, it's not as if I'm restricted by the charter. The
Okay.
charter just requires I have to come to you
Okay.
to increase the number.
Moving on, no
Mr.
further
Chairman?
discussion. Yes, Councilwoman.
Just a question, clarification on the appointment of, I know that it says here that the director of law is the prosecuting attorney, but we do have a we do have a city prosecutor.
That-
How does that person become the city prosecutor? Is that an appointment by you or the mayor?
By me.
Okay. I'm fine with this.
Okay. While they're known as the city prosecutor, it still is the director of law who's the city prosecutor who appoints this person to act in her stead.
Okay.
That's correct. Their official title is Chief Assistant Prosecutor. There are 21 prosecutors. There's a Chief Assistant Prosecutor, a First Assistant Prosecutor, and then 19 Assistant Prosecutors.
So how 21 positions are filled?
That's correct.
And does that include code enforcement in this, or is that
No.
all in the courts?
No, code enforcement we have over on the civil side, even though it is criminal, but
Right.
we have those on the civil side,
Okay.
and they're separate from that number.
Interesting. Thank you. No further discussion. Recommendation number 60 is not on the table for recommendation or proposal. And I have messed up my stack of papers. 4 of 18, 3 of 18, 5 of 18. Anything further under Department of Law?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
No,
I
don't
thought
be
we were
sorry.
going, I thought we were going to consider number 60. recommendation
Oh.
60.
Yeah,
Is this, because we didn't have a roll call.
no, we didn't. I didn't think, because I was fine with that, the way that it currently happens. I thought that meant that the way
Okay.
it stands now is fine, but I'll call the roll. That is,
But it says the recommendation is to remove the requirement that council fix the number of assistant prosecutors. So that's a change, correct?
yes.
Okay, so.
That was a
It's a
recommendation from
2008
2008.
recommendation.
Yes.
I
So,
didn't hear the recommendation from 2018, so I
Okay.
was moving on. But
But
if that's a recommendation.
did this pass in 2008?
It did,
It never, the
But it
council
never-
But it
did
didn't go
not-
on the ballot?
right,
No, and the council didn't accept that recommendation to put it on the ballot.
right.
Okay, and so you don't want to do that in 2018?
It's not up to me. I'm up to calling the roll. The discussion at the table was, it's working out well. The director wasn't necessarily too
Okay.
enthralled with it, so I was prepared to move on. But if we want to make that recommendation to the council president for consideration of the voters, we can do it.
If we already have a process by which the law director can increase it, then I'm fine.
Mr. Chair, I guess your explanation before made sense. It just seems redundant to me because council has the authority annually to accept or reject the budget, which outlines the amount of I would imagine which would outline the amount of prosecutors in which the law director would like.
Right.
So it just seems like a weird, is this the only requirement for the amount of staff in any department in the city?
I don't know if any department, I haven't really looked at that. I
Me-
mean,
I mean,
Like
the-
battalion chiefs,
Chiefs.
chiefs, and
There's
those kind of.
Right,
limitations
sure,
for-
sure.
and-
Because you don't want to have 100, I
Yeah.
get that.
Right.
So I guess my point is that there is a process for council to accept or reject the amount of employees a department head brings. It's the budget process. So I would personally, and I don't know if it in application matters, but I would like the law director to have flexibility if she needs more prosecutors to be able to just
change that language.
to be able to just bring on more prosecutors, right? I mean,
Right.
if she sees the need, because the other part of it is that if the law director has to put forth a ordinance to do so, does that then trigger political process? And I mean, I don't know, I guess I think it makes more sense for her to have the flexibility to bring in who she needs, not needing an ordinance. Just thought.
No, I mean, I agree. This is antiquated. It's from years gone by. But there's a
1931.
right, there's a process in place to make sure that our crimes are being prosecuted, right? But I'll call the roll. I mean, this in application, I don't think at this time, but this is once every 10 years, right? There could be a new chair. But I guess then we will call the roll on recommendation. What number are we gonna call it? Recommendation number 26 from the 2018 Charter Review Commission will be to recommend to amend Section 84 to remove the requirement that council fix the number of assistant prosecutors by ordinance and instead leave the number at the discretion of the Director of Law and the annual budget process. Everybody good? Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll ask the clerk call the roll. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to Chapter 17, Department of Finance. Exciting stuff. There was one recommendation, which previously was known as 61, to amend 94 to provide that the Director of Finance shall be the Chief Financial and Accounting Officer of the city. and be in charge of maintenance of all accounting records, the collection, audit, custody, safeguarding, investment, and disbursement of city funds and monies, preparation of budgets and annual appropriation measures, and the monitoring of city revenues and expenditures, the preparation of periodic financial reports, and the purchase of all goods and services needed by the city. I'm pretty sure that's what she does. But I believe they wanted to add, and I'm not, Rachel, do you remember? Were they just adding duties more specifically, outlining?
Says that the amendment clarifies that the Director of Finance is the city's chief financial and accounting officer and better identifies the duties of the director.
Keeping supervision of all accounts. I really don't see how that clarifies anything.
So this is,
My
The
personal
Director of
opinion.
Finance had no
this is already what
particular-
the,
Right, and it's all
Finance
certified by the state, and, you know, our duties and responsibilities as a city are all clearly identified. To add things to the list of what Director Dumas does, she doesn't need right now. But if there is, again, I'm gonna go through these proposals, and if anybody wants to call the roll and recommend it to the council for consideration, unless I hear otherwise, I will move on. But this one seems not necessary, in my opinion, as one member.
And I don't want to inundate the electorate
Right.
with a lot of minutia.
Right. And, I mean, we know what Director Dumas does, and a list of,
Yeah.
I don't believe is beneficial. Then on section 95, accounting procedure, we had a recommendation, modernizes the requirements for the city's accounting procedures and incorporates the standards of generally accepted accounting principles, which we're required to do by law, and audited and certified by third party and the state. Has to be a balanced budget. Looking for discussion on recommendation 62. Exciting stuff.
no discussion on my part.
Hearing nothing, we're gonna move on to number 96, monthly financial statement, section 96 of the charter. We had a recommendation 63, which purportedly provides flexibility for the Director of Finance and the council to determine the frequency of periodic financial reports and the form of the reports.
Isn't this already the job description? I mean, in the,
I think it would,
How it's
what it's
reported.
asking, what it's considering is, actual spreadsheets being supplied to council, on a no more than monthly basis of expenditures and receipts, and I think that would, I mean,
Books are kept differently now. I mean, we almost have contemporaneous accounting with our electronic accounting system, whereas in the past, you know,
and you start getting into enterprise funds and the utilities.
Yeah.
Airport, I think would be work that is not necessary, but again, I'm looking for direction from the commission if this is interesting.
When I read this, to me, it sounds like this amendment is to change it so they don't have to submit it monthly. Because if you read 96, it's the second meeting at each month. So what the recommendation looks like to me is that they're recommending that the monthly requirement is removed. And another period is determined by council or the Director of Finance. But it's not to be more than monthly. So like loosening it up to quarterly or something else is what it looks like.
or what, as the council asks. It doesn't
Right.
even require, I mean, the council would have to say, we want this report. under the new language.
Which council could do at any time, anyhow. But the last sentence of 96, as it's written, financial reports shall also be prepared for each quarter and fiscal year, and for such other periods as may be required. So how does it loosen it? So it's,
I think
right, I understand what you're saying, that it looks like they're not required to do it monthly, but then they're required to do it quarterly and
quarterly
annually.
anyway.
Right. I'm moving on.
Yes, please.
That would be Rachel.
It's too cold.
Commissioner of Accounts, Section 97. Bookkeepers, other employees. 98, special audits. There was a recommendation to provide that audits, amend 98 to provide that special audits upon the death, resignation, removal, or expiration of the term of a city officer shall occur if requested to do so by the mayor or the council. Subject to mayoral or councilmatic request, place responsibility for those. I have no idea where this came from. A lot of people dying in 2008.
Thank you.
With drawers
Or in
full of money.
1931.
Or in 1931. Not hearing a lot of discussion from the commission. I believe we will move on to the Division of Treasury, Section 100, the duties. I see no other recommendations from 2008. I haven't heard any recommendations from 2018. This is basic city operations, general overview, governing regulations to assessments and licenses, appropriations, claims, when contracts are void. We should get Betsy up here to talk sinking fund. Just keep things interesting. I hope she's not watching.
Going on in 110-1.
Civil defense expenditures, 1982. Those were interesting times. You have a recommendation for 110-1?
I'm just saying, it seems like someone's really paranoid about spending city money on thermonuclear attacks.
It was the 80s.
Yeah. Weird decade.
Yeah, right.
Comment.
Understood.
Recommendation.
Duly noted in the minutes. Chapter 19, Department of Public Utilities, there were no recommendations. Again, general powers and duties, the utility rates, accounts of publicly owned utilities. Utilities are enterprise funds, which are not, there's no tax dollars that go into it. They're supported by the ratepayers. There are several different accounting principles and reporting mechanisms with it through not only the PUCO, but the state. I think the rates should be set by council, approved by council. It's not always fun, but it's important to make sure that nobody's, yes, Reverend?
Yeah, it's a question. Does the council currently set the utility rates?
Yes.
So there's public hearings about
Oh, yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I have a separate question, Mr. Chairman. I know we set the rates. I know we set the rates, but there's also the fees, et cetera, that are charged, which, as we're seeing, are more than
That's my question.
the
All
rates.
set by council.
The fees are also set by, including what was the water, the one that, I don't want to get into,
Energy adjustment.
yeah, I don't want to get that deep into it
Always
here.
set by council.
Here, okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, for Cleveland Public Power, Cleveland Water, the Division of Water, Water Pollution Control, all the rates and fees are set by ordinance. How frequently they're reviewed and the process of reviewing kind of differs. But the last big one was with water in, I don't know, 6 years ago, 5 years ago. And that was it was a long, tough process. CPP, we're coming up on one. We've hired working through consultants to present to council the current fee structure, and will be considered probably either later this year or next year for Cleveland Public Power, but it's all set by council action.
Is that in the charter?
Yeah, 112, fixation of utility rates shall be fixed by the Board of Control, subject however to approval by council. So it goes both to council and the Board of Control, which the Board of Control is the administration's function to
Right.
let contracts, et cetera.
This says just the rates. Is those fees that public utilities are charging residents, are those considered rates?
Every single thing that they charge a customer
Right.
is passed by council.
Right, but, so, to me, rates would mean, you know, I'm paying so much per MCI or whatever it
MCF,
is, MCF. But then there's also that delivery service fee that's put on there.
Changing of the meter.
Right.
Those are all included in the rates. Anything
that's what I'm asking.
Anything that a utility charges a customer
Is considered a rate.
for whatever service. You
Okay.
need a leak check, you need a street opening permit, you need, MCFs are the baseline of our rates, but the
Right.
structure of the fee, monthly fees, those are all considered rates. And they are fixed by council.
Just for clarification for my sake, when I ask that question to the other council person, they don't say yes to that. So that's what makes me wonder.
Yeah, I could show you, Reverend.
Okay.
I mean, it's probably the hardest hearings. It's the most information. It's the most impactful on our residents, on our constituents. It's taken very seriously by council. I mean, you have 5 of them sitting right here. I mean, I can tell you that it's a really big part of what we do. We don't do it very often.
So
right?
if there is an energy adjustment rate on my CPP bill, that means the city council has approved that. That's what you're telling me?
The energy adjustment charge is absolutely approved by ordinance and has been since 1982. Now, the amount of the charge,
That's what I'm talking
right, the
about.
language of the EAP is set by council, but the actual dollar amount
That's what I'm talking
is
about.
determined by CPP based on fluctuations of purchase of power.
Well, that's what I'm talking about right there.
Okay.
Can I get that reviewed by the council? That's there.
Yes.
Well, but you said it's not being reviewed by council. You said it's reviewed by the CPP board person, not by council.
It's currently being reviewed by. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Right.
talking about.
So it'll be resolved that way.
Well, isn't it better that we resolve it by charter instead of having to spend city money going to court to resolve it?
We didn't.
I,
We didn't choose to do that.
well, that choice was made because it's not being currently done by council.
I'm happy to talk EAP with you anytime, and we do need to look at the rates and charges of CPP that have not been raised in 20 years. Being the current chair of public utilities, I can tell you that those rates are gonna go up and your EAP will go down. But you haven't had a rate increase if you're a CPP customer since in 20 years, which is ridiculous for a utility, for a power company.
Well,
So
but-
rates will go up, EAP will go down. The whole EAP is there to balance the books. You have to, it's the purchase of power off the grid.
Yeah, okay, then we're talking about the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
But the allowance of the energy adjustment charge is done by ordinance.
But not how much.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is like a wise thing to say or not, but I just think it's ridiculous that council is the one that is, I don't know. Because, I mean, if we haven't raised rates in 20 years, clearly that means that folks politically aren't interested in raising rates. And then
Well,
that
they are now.
forces.
They better be.
That forces, well, what I'm saying is.
Right.
I don't know. I guess I see the check needed there,
Right.
right? For council to approve it so that something crazy doesn't happen because we represent the people. At the same time, if we are not allowing anyone to raise prices when every single industry in the world in the last 20 years has raised prices because costs have gone up, and we're saying, no, you can't do that, and then it's creating confusion around EAP and other stuff. I don't know. I think it's a little crazy.
Well, that's why it makes more
Right,
sense.
but how would you fix it?
It makes more sense for the council, from a public point of view, to be reviewing and raising that rate instead of backhand and raising the rate by giving me an energy adjustment charge that the council isn't even involved in making that decision on. That's the point.
I guess what I would probably think in the past, you know, from a, and again, politics is policy. It's important to understand that in many cases. If you are a council person, and I don't know that, when was the last time that we voted on an increase or non-increase?
For CPP?
Yeah. No, so the point is that you can make the argument, if you're a council person and you raise energy rates, well, then you don't want to do that because everyone's going to run around and say, Councilman X is raising your electrical costs. I guess that would be the argument. I don't know. I'm just trying
That's
to.
why it's taken very seriously.
That's why, exactly.
That's why we're currently doing
I-
rate study.
I'm not saying that's the best way to do it.
I understand your point,
Yeah.
Mr. Councilman, but I'd rather be told the truth up front, raise my rate instead of backhanding the rate.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
That's the whole point.
I 100%
Let's
agree
Let's
with you.
handle it in a mature way instead of being so politically correct, which makes a mess. That's my point.
I 100% agree with you.
Right.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to think of why it's been in that place, is what I'm trying to think of.
Yeah.
But I
mean,
agree with
And in reality, there's
So
always
why
going
is
to be an
everything
energy
of that?
adjustment charge. There's always going to be because CPP doesn't produce energy.
Right.
They don't make it. They
Right.
buy it.
Exactly.
Right? And then they transfer, they get it to the customer.
Right.
Right. So there has to be some flexibility. You cannot charge a flat rate for that when
So,
the market changes every day.
On that point then,
Right, exactly.
why
I
isn't,
agree
I
with
mean, I
that.
guess, is the fear of allowing CPP, why is the council involved, I guess?
On setting the rates?
Yes.
Because it directly impacts every
Right.
person who's
Because
a
it's,
Right.
customer.
because it's Cleveland Public Power.
So if you give it to, say, a board of control,
So how do you provide flexibility for them to transparently lower or raise their rates while also having the check there?
It's done Mr. Councilman, it's done every month with First Energy, they have to go through PUCO. So
Right.
instead of PUCO, the city council is PUCO. It's the same thing,
Right.
same process.
so we also participate in PUCO. But we're doing
Yeah.
a rate study now, and
Yep.
CPPs, the rates are being looked at, and we're gonna have a discussion, a very frank and candid discussion about CPP rates
Yep.
soon. But
We'll
I
be
still
looking
think
forward
it's,
to that discussion.
I still think it's important that council, I mean,
Sure.
as hard as it is and difficult, I mean, the water rate, that
That's
was a
what we
really
elected
hard
for.
time for a council member, because when you're at a block watch or you're at a safety meeting, that's what people wanna talk about.
Yeah.
So you better be ready to talk
Although
about it.
I
Absolutely.
do think though that, and I'll get off the subject, that to the prior point, going and saying, you know, the rates have been raised because costs have gone up and that's what it is more clear than the way it currently is.
I agree, but it hasn't always been like that,
Right.
right? So these things change frequently.
Yep.
Right now, that's the hot issue, and it was the end of last year.
Right.
And we're taking the appropriate steps to fix it. But
That's
people ain't
good
gonna
to
be
hear.
happy.
You know, that's the first time I've heard that the council is taking appropriate steps, because the public is pretty uptight about it.
Because there's a lot of
also,
misinformation out
we
there.
we
So
are
I'm
the
glad we
public
were
and the
able to clear
customers
that up.
too.
Huh?
So we are the public and the customers
Yeah,
as
right.
well. So.
Yeah, it's a good one. It was exciting. It was a good discussion on chapter 19. I didn't see that coming. Good work, everybody. Mission adjourned. No, you did. Chapter 23, public health.
Good job, Casey.
Wait, did I skip? No, I didn't skip. Page 14 of 18, public health, general provisions. I would have, anybody input? So the Division of Health traditionally was funded by primarily grants. This is the first time we're embarking on it. We should have gotten Blaine Chairman in here, but, or the director, because we're transitioning it to a general fund, more general fund kind of department. And I'm wondering if there were any necessary charter amendments, but it's so general that I don't think there are.
It doesn't really even talk about a department.
Right, it's just what we kind of want them to do, go out and find a way to do it. But nothing's jumping out at me that needs to be added or subtracted. Chapter 23. Hearing nothing on the Department of Public Health, we will go to page 15 of 18, Chapter 37, Officers and Employees. Again, there were no recommendations from 2008.
I have one question.
Yes.
In 193, it says the Office of City Manager.
Yeah.
It's done in 31.
Right. I don't even know if
Was
we
there
went
one
under the
back
city
then?
manager back
Which-
then.
There was, yeah, I mean, the city went
Yep.
from mayoral to city manager in the 30s.
And
yeah.
back again.
But then back to mayor council. I think that's just old. But is that something that the commission feels strongly about, that we should?
Popped out to me. I
Yeah.
could care less, but.
I don't want a city manager.
You don't want a city manager?
Nope.
All right, there you
I
go.
want them responsible to the people.
To the people,
Just change that to the mayor?
To the council.
Well, you know, what this may be is they may have gotten rid of the references to city manager in the charter the last time they amended it, because it says all persons holding administrative office, excepting the office of city manager, at the time provisions take effect, shall continue in office. So what they're saying is the city manager does not continue in office when that charter section took effect in 1931. So it may have been because it was removed. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, office or department is abolished by this charter, discharged by the office. Oh, I see.
so they're saying all persons holding office except the city manager at the time provisions of this charter take effect shall continue in office. So they're saying the city manager does not continue in office when that charter section
Oh.
took effect.
Everybody good? Chapter, oh, that's traffic.
Oh, one thing I'd like to address on 196, hours of labor on page 16.
Yes.
I know in the police department, we have 10-hour shifts, and our work weeks aren't standard weeks. Does this affect that, or?
No, because of a series of decisions and a provision in the state constitution, the collective bargaining agreement would control over this section.
Okay.
You're trying to get out of some work though there, Ham. Good try.
I don't remember the last 8 hours.
Exactly.
All right, where's my agenda? Okay. Charter Part D, complete. Looking for other comments. Looking for guidance on where the commission wants to go. We still have some open-ended election discussions that we will schedule. The discussion about the scattered and the
Oh.
at-large, those kind of things. We're gonna have our own day, but I thought it would be best to move continuously through the charter and see if any other big things pop up that need, when you want somebody to come in and talk about something, when you want a full hearing on it, we have the time. Clearly, we have the energy and we can push through it.
Is there a deadline for the commission?
The year, by the end of the year, right?
The end of this year?
Yes. Is that
What
right,
does the
Rachel?
charter say?
The charter,
The
change
council
that.
president would have wanted this to wrap up in 6 months, but we have a full year under the charter.
Right, we don't need to take the year, but we can.
Okay.
Right. We're gonna keep meeting every 2 weeks unless a holiday falls on it. Anybody know if there's a holiday on Thursday, August 2nd? Darn it.
Make one.
Kidding, you guys. All right, Charter Review Commission meeting
The,
for Thursday, July 19th. Councilwoman Brady.
Thank you. So Chapter 40, Section 203, the traffic law photo monitoring devices. This was this changed in 14 due to the state's?
Correct.
No.
Okay.
It was an initiated charter
and
amendment.
then it was a citizen-initiated charter.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
right.
voted on.
But,
It's different from what the state provision is.
okay,
This essentially prohibits us unless
Right.
we can issue a ticket at the time the traffic camera catches you, which kind of negates the reason they
I
have a
remember
camera.
this, right,
Right.
this was against
Yeah.
the photo enforcement,
That's right.
which
The-
we're now prohibited from enforcing.
Essentially, it does. The state law allows, the state law that was present allowed it with the presence of a police officer, but that it didn't go so far as in ours, where it personally issues the ticket to the alleged violator at the time of the violation.
Essentially.
It essentially makes it not worthwhile to have the camera, because the alternative.
You're just still doing a traffic stop.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
Right.
Exactly. I mean,
We're
it's-
not allowed to do the photo,
Well, we could if the officer issued the ticket at the time they were caught
based
on
on
the photo.
this.
Yes.
But what about state law?
State law,
Okay.
people can have cameras, yes.
We're not.
There's,
They have a bill going
But you have
through.
to have a police officer sitting there.
And then go pull them over and hand them a ticket.
Yeah,
No,
so
no,
we
no,
don't have to
state,
do that
no,
under
no, state law, you can have cameras, but you have to have a police officer that is there in that, witnesses it.
And there was just a court case, and I can't remember addressing that. I don't know if there were 3 provisions in the new state law that were struck down by the Supreme Court. I just can't remember which ones they were. I know one was on education of the public. I didn't pay that much attention to it because it didn't affect us.
I mean, that's why Lindale has that little booth with a police officer in it.
Given
That
that this
you
was an
can't see.
initiative petition in 2014, I frankly don't want to
No, I just wanted to,
touch it because it was drafted and voted on by the citizens of the city of Cleveland and it is now in our charter and I'm cool with it, so.
I just have a question to the chair. In regards to the cameras, since we're not using it for that, can the cameras be used for something else, like monitoring the neighborhood for crime prevention or crime watching?
It's a different kind of camera.
It's
The
different.
photo enforcement cameras specifically took pictures when there's certain triggers. There was like a sensor in the road. They really weren't designed to capture events that occurred. Those are different kinds of cameras.
And those cameras were not technically property of the city of Cleveland because we got a vendor that was paying for them, so the majority have come down, but I know they continued to catch images because there were some accidents, I don't know, but it was still accessible for a while, but it no longer is, which is why we're going to the blue light cameras throughout the neighborhoods. And with the CPP, the streetlights.
And just quickly to that point, the administration did just put out a plan for additional cameras that might be of interest. But those are the Cleveland Police blue light cameras. So.
those are surveillance cameras.
Yep.
aren't
Those do more of
traffic
that.
enforcement.
They monitor hotspot areas and things like that.
Great, thank you, everybody. Charter Review Commission stands adjourned. Next to meet Thursday, August 2nd, 10 o'clock, Mercedes Cotner Committee Room, or at the discretion of the chair. Yeah. I might call everybody tomorrow.
Why didn't you take us to lunch or something?
Right.
That's what I thought he was gonna say. That's what the clerk's for.